Friends. I hope you are doing great. In this video, we are going to talk about the introduction of derivatives, which basically are just a change in a function. If we look at a constant function, for example, a constant function has its graph parallel to x-axis at the specific height. For example, if we choose y equals to c, that means the entire function would be a horizontal line at this height c. Now, no matter at what point we study this function, it will always has the output would always be the same height. If I'm studying it at a, the point a and the value of function at a, which will be y value at a, it will be c. At a point the output is c, the y value is c, the function value at input a is c. If I study it at any other point, it's still the same height. Any next point, it's still the same height. If I choose another reference point, say B, my output for B is again C. So this Y equals to C line has the same height C at every input, no matter what value you choose, even before A or at A or after A or at B or wherever. So there's no change happening over the period of time if we consider this axis as a time axis, for example, or any other commodity it may be. So with respect to this axis, whether it is x or whether that is t, there's no change in y, there's no change in the function values, there's no change in the outputs. So we would say the change is zero. If we look at it from algebraic point of view, we say that the change will be in such a way that change in y with respect to change that happens due to x or due to independent. So what change are happening in the dependent variable or in the outputs with respect to the changes that we made in the inputs. So change in y should be expressed as y2 minus y1, that is the next value in the function minus the previous value, or the next height of the function minus the previous height of the function, divided by x2 minus x1, that is the next input minus the previous input, right? So gap in the outputs divided by gap in the inputs, or change in the outputs divided by change in the inputs. Since we see that the outputs are C at all the locations, you find the output at A, that's C, you find the output at B, it's a C. The height at A is C, the height corresponding to B input is again C. So that there's no change in it. C minus C will be 0. So we have 0 change in Y and we have this change in X. So X has changed from A to point B. That means there's been a run. For example, we call the change in x as a run, we take this as a run, and the change in y we call that rise. So there's no rise, we just have made a change in x. So we say that this change in constant function with respect to the inputs x is 0. There's no change in the constant function. Then if I take another function, y is equals to x, that's our identity function, we know. So whatever value of x you put in this equation, you get the same value for y. So x and y are identical to each other. My output corresponding to input a will be a. So at a my output is again a. At b my output would be b. If I choose any other points between a and b, for example, I choose a point here, we call it d, the output would be the same d, because it's an identity function. Whatever input you give to it, you get the same output, right? So if I find the slope of this function, the slope is basically the change that we get in the function from one point to another. So if I look at the slope, we have this slope, or we get this delta y by delta x, that means change in y divided by change in x, or change in the outputs with respect to change in the inputs. So my next output is b, my previous output is a, my next input is b and previous input is a. Both values are same, so I get 1, right? If we focus here, we have y is equals to 1 times x, so the slope is 1 automatically. Whenever we talk about general linear functions, we call them y equals to mx plus c, where m stands for the slope. So whatever we have got multiplied with x is the slope of the linear equation. So if it is 1x, that means the slope is 1. So slope and rate of change, slope and change in outputs with respect to inputs is the same thing. They are the same things with different names only, right? Now if I choose any linear equation, not necessarily with one slope, with any slope, maybe m or n or whatever slope, if it's a linear line and it got any slope, so the slope is the ratio of rise over run. We know this thing, okay, how much the function is rising or how much the function outputs or the function how height is changing when I make changes in the inputs, right? So change in y with respect to change in x, or I say a change in the function, that is m times x with respect to x is m, because slope and this rate of change is the same thing. So if I have an equation y is equals to 3x, that delta y by delta x will be equal to 3. If I have y equals to minus 4x, then delta y by delta x will be negative 4. So whatever slope I have, the rate of change will be the same thing. We have studied difference quotient while we were talking about the functions in chapter number 1 of James Stewart calculus. We said difference quotient was f of x plus h minus f of x divided by h. If you look at it, f of x plus h means studying function at a step ahead of x. So you take any input x. For example, I draw a function for you. If this is a function, maybe we again take a linear function. So if this is my input x and I take a step ahead, the next input would be x plus h, right? So now my output at x is x comma f of x, and my output at x plus h is x plus h, that's my input, and the output is f of x plus h, right? So these are the two values that I'm looking at. So this, for example, this is a and f of a, this is b and f of b. So if we look at the rise that we have established, so on y-axis, the change in y, this height is from f of x to f of x plus h. So this is my height. This is y2 minus y1, because my y1 is f of x, y2 is f of x plus h. So y2 minus y1, this is delta y, the same thing, divided by, if I take this to be x2 and this one is my x1, if I subtract them, x plus h minus x will be h, because x and x will get cancelled. So difference quotient and delta y by delta x are the same things.